OK, so 5 members of a Rochdale grooming gang who repeatedly attacked 2 young girls, quote, like pieces of meat, in a lair dubbed the Butcher's Flat 2 decades ago, have been jailed for more than 70 years. The victims, who are known only as Girl A and Girl B, were aged 13 and 14 when they were plied with alcohol, cannabis and ecstasy pills before being sexually assaulted for around 2 years by various men, either together or on their own. With us in the studio to explain all of this is GBNews' investigations reporter. It's Charlie Peters. Charlie.
So the sentences are a total of 70 years. The lowest sentence, just 8 years just for one of the perpetrators of this horrific ordeal, and 20 years for the most serious offender. The surnames are Ghani, twice, Hussein, Kazmi and Rhodes. Rhodes was from Blackpool, but the other men were from Rochdale. Now, the acts that they committed are horrifying. We can't repeat all of them on air, but it was a severe and lengthy period of abuse, almost daily, said one of the victims. For 6 years, the acts started in 2002 and were tracked until 2006 by the police. And they only got wind of this abuse in 2015, when Girl A was at a parental course run by Rochdale Borough Council and repeated what had happened to her when she was a schoolgirl. And the council heard this and passed it up to the police, who took action immediately and then got in contact with Girl B. But what I've heard this morning from campaigners in Rochdale, and indeed survivors we've been in touch with for well over a year in our work on the grooming gang scandal in this country, is that why did it take 8 years for this news to be reported in 2015, the abuse, and then for the trial and the sentencing to take place in 2023? Now, Maggie Oliver, the Greater Manchester Police whistleblower who exposed the scandal in Rochdale in 2012 when she resigned her post as a detective, said that it was inhumane to make victims wait that long for justice. Now, GMP have said that they did everything they could, and they thanked the victims for their engagement and dedication to this case, at what must have been the most appalling experience.
For 8 years, people have been walking the streets accused of this stuff, waiting for a trial and to be sentenced.
It's an extremely long time to wait for this kind of justice to take place, especially as we know that in the early noughties, when much of this abuse was taking place in Rochdale, the police operation then failed. It was called Operation Augusta. It did not track the number of perpetrators as it needed to, and when it did find hundreds of suspected paedophiles on a file, we know that Greater Manchester Police did not follow up on those investigations. That's eventually why Maggie Oliver quit her role, to expose that failure. The new operation, particularly in South Manchester, Operation Green Jacket, has found hundreds of new victims since it was launched some years ago, and also has made over 40 arrests, and the 42nd arrest was made last month. So Greater Manchester Police is showing and is demonstrating they've got more of a grip on this problem they did 2 decades ago, but that's stepping up from a very low bar. Some of the abuse that we heard, plied with alcohol and drugs, the standard affair that you see with this kind of appalling abuse. Girls met outside school gates, often still in their school uniform, and then taken to, as you described, the Butcher's Lair, which is a flat above a butcher's shop in Rochdale. But we also know that they were abused in cars, in public parks, in Saddleworth Moor, a barren open space in northwest Greater Manchester. And it's just relentless abuse. 6 years, one of the victims said, daily, where this kind of stuff was happening to her. And as I said, some of the detail we just can't repeat, but it is appalling.
Oh, it is absolutely shocking. Massive, massive questions to be answered from the police down. I can't get over that length of time that it's taken them to actually face sentencing. And some of the sentences, I think, will raise eyebrows as well. So to be clear, it's a collective 70 years, right? But obviously the breakdown of that is maybe not as severe as that makes it sound.
Well, 4 of the men are in their 30s, their late 30s, so they were younger men when this abuse was taking place. And one of the abusers is 50 years of age. He's Mohammed Ghani. He actually had contact with his brother. One of his brothers is another member of this ring that's gone down. And that, I think, exposes the family links and the community-based aspect of this abuse, which in Rochdale often was perpetrated by members of the British Pakistani community. And that's reflected in this case as well. And we know that those people were operating in a ring for so long at this time. So their abuse was linked. They worked together. They facilitated this abuse. And this reflects a very disturbing wider trend, of course, across the country, where so many of these other cases have been found. I mean, Maggie Oliver this morning, speaking about the sentencing, she actually said it's a relief that some proper sentences are finally happening. Because 8 years for one, 20 years for another, it is a step in the right direction,
Yeah.
she said, because, as you know, Patrick, some of the sentences in the past have been pitiful, according to campaigners, in comparison to what we're seeing now.
Some people have spent longer trying to fight their deportation as a result of these crimes than they did spend in prison for their crimes.
That's correct. That's correct. And so some hope, actually, from this sentencing yesterday in Manchester, that there is more of an effort being taken by the authorities on this. So campaigners and survivors telling GBNews this morning that even though the delay is inhumane, the action by Greater Manchester Police in tandem with Rochdale Borough Council and the CPS does show that lessons have been learned in lots of areas and they are working more effectively to deal with this problem. As you know, political correctness and classism and just total neglect towards victims was a key dampener of their efforts 2 decades ago.